Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marilee Selesky, and I am the chair of the Design Review Committee. Welcome to our December 18th, 2023 special virtual meeting. I will call the meeting to order at 4:33 p.m. and we will begin our meeting with a land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. We'll start off with the meeting with an AV check, make sure everybody can hear and be heard, starting with Nathan.
Hi, I can hear.
You're good. Doug.
Yes, yep, I can hear.
Great. Jonathan.
I can hear.
Perfect. Rob, we have regrets from. Do we have, I'm sorry, I apologize, Maria?
Yes, it's Maria. Yes, I can hear you. Perfectly.
Great.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Maria. Thank you. Charlotte, we have regrets from Sandrine and Stanley. Is there anybody from the committee that I've missed? No. Okay. So next we will go to the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was held on November 21st, 2022. Could I please have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 21st, 2022 meeting?
I approve to have the minutes approved, or I motion to have the minutes approved.
Perfect. Thank you, Nathan. And could I get a seconder? Doug, can you? Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was on mute. I second the minutes, yeah.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, so we have Nathan as the mover and Doug as the seconder. Were there any errors or omissions noted in the meeting minutes that we should document? No? Okay. Thank you. I'll now call for the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes, if you could signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, say nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So the motion is carried and the minutes are approved. Thank you. Next, on to the approval of the order of business. To our legislative assistant, do we have any additions or modifications to the agenda?
Thank you, Chair. There are no additions or deletions to today's agenda from the clerk's office.
Perfect. Thank you. So to the committee, could I have a motion to approve the agenda as distributed?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Nathan. And a seconder?
I could second. Keep it going.
Great, thank you. So we've got Nathan as the mover, Doug as the seconder. I'll call for the question to approve the agenda as circulated. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and contrary minded say nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone. So the motion is carried. Next, we'll move on to the call for declaration of any conflicts of interest. Do any of the committee members present today have a conflict to declare as a result of the agenda? No? Okay.
So just, I have one question. I did send an email to Annie. I'm not sure did she receive that email. I think that I applied to be in the committee as a member of the public, but 3 weeks ago I received my, I will receive my license as a licensed architect. Is that a problem? So I don't know how you carry my membership as a member of the public or as an architect. And is that something that's important here?
Thank you to the member through the chair, and my apologies for not having seen that email. I do see it now, and I do not believe that this would be an issue from the appointment side of things. But it would not, remove you as a member of the committee. I'm sure that we have had members of the committee in the past that were in a public, just general role, potentially with a professional background. So I think we're good to proceed unless there are any flags from planning staff.
Oh, no. Hi, Dean McDougall. No concerns from my understanding of the requirements for who to make up the committee.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so just before we go forward, any last conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest anyone wants to bring forward? Okay, seeing that there are none at this time, we'll move on to the item 5, which is the report. So we will move on to item 5.1.1, which is case 01543, Downtown Halifax Site Plan Approval Application for a mixed-use building at the corner of Sackville Street, Granville Street, and Hollis Street, Halifax, known as Sky Halifax. This item will start with a presentation from HRM staff, and members of the committee will be able to ask questions of clarification on the presentation. The applicant will then provide their presentation and be available for members to ask questions. Following these questions, I will ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion, and members can then discuss the motion on the floor. I will ask Dean McDougall, Planner 3, to start us off by providing the staff presentation on this item.
Okay, great. Thank you. Share my screen. Can you confirm that the presentation is great? Okay, good evening or good afternoon. I guess evening this time of year. My name is Dean McDougall, and I'll be providing the presentation for case 2023-01543, which is a site plan approval application in downtown Halifax. One second, sorry. There we go. So the applicant is Upland Planning and Design, and they're acting on behalf of the property owner, United Gulf Developments. And the location is 1591 Granville Street and 1568 Hollis Street. And the proposal is for a 21-story mixed-use development with 2 tower components. As shown outlined in red on this image, the subject site is located at the corner of Sackville Street, Granville Street, and Hollis Street in downtown Halifax. It's located near the Mountain Equipment Co-op building. It abuts the Metro Park parking facility, and it's adjacent to the Green Lantern and Maple buildings. This image is taken from the corner of Sackville and Hollis. As you can see, the site is largely vacant. The one building on the site is currently being demolished, and that is the building with the mural located on the left side of this image. A little bit of history. This property did receive a site plan approval back in November of 2019. So staff did recommend that the application be refused at that time, but after some discussion by the DRC, it was approved, subject to several conditions, and the staff report outlines those conditions and the history of the application in greater detail. After receiving the site plan approval, the property owner received a demolition permit to remove the existing structure on the property, as well as a building permit to allow the commencement of subgrade work. During the detailed design, it was identified by the applicant that adjustments were needed to accommodate mechanical and structural considerations. And so as changes were needed, the applicant took this opportunity to revisit the overall design of the building and make several tweaks. And I'll let the applicant get into more detail about what those tweaks are. But the Downtown Halifax plan, it does not allow for amendments to a previous site plan approval application. So if any change is proposed, the applicant is required to apply for an entirely new approval. which they have done under this application. So it's an entirely new application, even though a couple things have changed in the design compared to the previous approved plan in 2019. But staff are required to evaluate it in its entirety, even though a couple things may have changed. And this is important to note as well, the repeal of the downtown Halifax plan. So on May 9th in 2023, Regional Council initiated a process to repeal the downtown Halifax plan and to fully consolidate the plan area into the center plan. Now, the center plan was originally approved by Regional Council in 2021. And with that approval, most of the lands within downtown Halifax were brought under its jurisdiction. But during the adoption of the center plan, several areas of the downtown were carved out and allowed to remain under the downtown Halifax plan until the existing heritage conservation districts could be consolidated and expanded under a new downtown Halifax HCD or Heritage Conservation District. And council also allowed at that time 5 properties known as transition sites to remain under the downtown Halifax plan as well. And this was to allow them additional time to receive site plan approval and permits. And so the Sky Halifax site was one of those 5 transition sites. So in that additional time, the applicant has received a full site plan approval and a building permit for this property. Once the new downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District is approved and in effect, staff will then return to Regional Council with amendments to repeal the downtown Halifax plan entirely. So when that happens, the DRC will no longer exist as it is, and along with this planning process, the site plan approval planning process that we're currently doing. So for the applicant to ensure that the proposed changes that they like under this application, to ensure that they are secured, they're required to revise their building permit before the publication of the first notice to repeal the downtown Halifax plan. However, they require approval by DRC before they can go and request the revision to their building permit. This site here outlines the regulatory context applicable to the site. Some items to note are the pre and post bonus heights of 51 and 66 meters, and that a portion of the site is covered by a view plane. So the development will consist of a mix of uses, including a hotel, ground floor retail, and residential units. 5 levels of underground parking are proposed that will be accessed off Hollis Street. 2 ground floor levels, one facing Hollis Street and the other Granville. Approximately 69 hotel units and approximately 349 residential units. There'll be a landscape rooftop terraces and amenity space. They're located on the 3rd, 6th, and 22nd levels. And then an overall building height of 66 meters, plus the penthouses. These images show in better detail the base of the building. So the image on the left shows a corner of Sackville and Granville. And then the residential entrances for both towers are located on the Granville Street frontage, in addition to several retail spaces. The image on the right shows the corner of Sackville and Hollis Street, and the entrance to the hotel will be located on Hollis Street, as well as additional retail space. These are the elevations. So the images on the left is the Granville Street elevation, and the image on the right is Hollis. Part of staff's role in this process is to evaluate the project to the general guidelines of the design manual. And we've identified one item for discussion that we think requires further consideration by the DRC, the Design Review Committee, and that's the guideline around the building roofscapes. So to ensure that the building designs provide articulation and elements of variety and visual interest, the design manual calls for building forms that follow a base, middle, and top design, in which these building elements are clearly defined and distinguishable from each other. So staff's concern is in regard to the top of the building, specifically the North Tower, and what we feel is a lack of distinguishable characteristics there, especially in comparison to the South Tower, which clearly has a distinguishable top. And this is largely achieved through the screening treatment that extends up the side of the building and across the front of the penthouse. So staff believe from a building materials perspective, the proposal meets the design manual requirements for the base and middle. However, the top of the North Tower does not meet the requirements, as there's not enough distinction created in the design through the creation of a unique architectural feature combined with the night lighting that they're proposing. The applicant is also requesting several variances to the quantitative requirements of the downtown Halifax LUB. And so the quantitative requirements are administered by the development officer, but that's if they meet the regulations in the LUB. If they would like to vary them, then the DRC can approve that variation. So there are 6 total variances, some of which apply in multiple locations. So the design manual, it lists potential conditions under which variances to the requirements of the LUB should be permitted. And it's those conditions listed in the design manual that staff base the recommendations on. So the first variance is in regard to the street line setback. So the setback of the building wall to the street. Now the requirement here is for the building to be placed 0 to 1.5 meters from the street line. And the applicant is requesting that the setback be increased in several locations. So staff recommended approval of this variance as it meets the objectives of the design manual, specifically as they are to provide a barrier-free access ramp. So they need more space for that, and to accommodate emergency egress and air intake rates. The second variance is in regard to the street wall height. So which is the point at which the street wall ends, and then the remainder of the building is to be stepped back. So the street wall height requirement here is a maximum of 18.5 meters, and the applicant's requesting that the height be increased in several locations up to 22.96 meters. So staff recommend approval here for this variance as well, as it meets the objectives of the design manual, and the height is consistent with the Metro Park and allows for a uniform street wall. So no concerns here from staff. The third variance is in regard to the street line width, which requires that the street wall extend the full width of the lot. The applicant is proposing a gap in the street wall for the public through block. Staff recommended against this variance in the last application, and that recommendation remains with this one. The staff believe the through block is located too close to the street intersection to achieve its intended clear purpose. And so pedestrians would be more inclined to stay on the public sidewalk at this point than use a cut through block. Also, staff have concerns with the lack of engaging pedestrian experiences and opportunities for connections, so entries into and out of that space. There's only a rear door for secondary residential access near Hollis Street that's accessing that space. The fourth variance is in regard to the street line step back. So this requires that portions of the building above the street wall be stepped back a certain distance to help enforce a human scale to the building while allowing greater height. Now, the applicant is requesting to reduce that step back at several locations. So for the north tower, a reduction from the required 3 meter step back for the mid-rise portion of the building and 4.5 meters for the high-rise portion. They're requesting that be reduced down to 2 meters and 1.5 meters at various locations. And this image on the screen here in green shows kind of where the areas of the variance are requested. And so for the south tower as well, the reduction would be down to 2.6 meters. And now if you factor in the balconies, the wraparound balconies, which we're required to do, the balconies on both towers extend 100% of the building width and slightly beyond that if you're counting the corner balconies. So therefore, with respect to the balconies, the overall effect is a lack of a street wall step back altogether. So staff recommended against this variance in the last application, and that recommendation also remains in this application. In this case of the building walls, combined with the wrapped around balconies, they result in an absence of the step backs altogether for the north tower from the 3 abutting streets. And this massing is inconsistent with the built form objectives of the downtown plan. Architecturally, through the building materials, there appears to be a base, middle, and top, but it isn't there with the massing, which is important as the step backs above the street wall are a fundamental guiding principle of the downtown Halifax design manual. So therefore, staff have no choice but to recommend that this variance request be refused. And then the 5th variance is in regard to the upper story side yard step back. So this requires that a portion of the building above the street wall be set back 5.5 meters for the mid-rise portion of the building, and then 11.5 meters for the high-rise portion, and that's from interior lot lines. Now, the applicant is requesting the step back be reduced to 2.2 meters for the exterior walls of the building, and then 0.35 meters for the balconies. While this reduction is quite substantial, staff do support it as it results in the concealment of an existing blank wall on the Metro Park facility, and also the limited development rights on the abutting property, the Metro Park facility. So those limited development rights reduce any potential future conflict between high-rise buildings on those two separate properties. And that's what this regulation is trying to achieve, is to reduce that conflict. But with the limited redevelopment properties of the Metro Park, staff have no concerns with varying and reducing those setbacks. And then the sixth variance is in regard to the tower width and separation. So the land use bylaw requires that any portion of a building above a height of 33.5 meters shall be a maximum width of 38 meters and a maximum depth of 27.5 meters. It also requires that the high-rise portions of the building above a height of 33.5 meters be separated a minimum of 23 meters. So the applicant is requesting the south tower width be increased to 54 meters, 57 meters including the balconies, and that the separation distance, be decreased to 18.9 meters or 15.3 meters with the balconies. It should be noted that the applicant is also requesting the north tower depth be varied, but this request is due to a conflicting definition in the land use bylaw that really should be addressed with housekeeping amendments if the downtown Halifax plan was to remain in place. But staff support the variance request on the north tower for the reduction in depth. Staff, however, do not support the variance request to the south tower, as that increased south tower width directly results in an undesirable separation distance between the two towers, the north and south towers. In addition, that large width of the south tower goes against the plan's objectives of providing sunlight penetration and sky view at the street level. A wind study was also completed, and the study indicates that pedestrian wind conditions for the proposed development are expected to meet or surpass suitable conditions. However, it was noted that higher than desired wind speeds and comfort levels were predicted in certain outdoor amenity areas. So a wind study addendum was done based on some proposed changes by the applicant, and it found that the wind conditions will be improved with the incorporation of high wind screens that extend around the roof perimeter, as well as several large high wind screens placed within seating areas, a large canopy above the main entrance to the terraces, and a series of high landscaping planters along the east edge of the terrace as well. Also, this project is required to provide a public benefit as the building exceeds the pre-bonus height limit. So the gross floor area to be gained is approximately 10,760 square meters. So using the calculation that's provided in the land use bylaw, the preliminary value of the required public benefits just shy of $600,000. So the applicant has proposed that this public benefit be put towards the undergrounding of overhead electrical and communication distribution systems. This was a condition by the DRC in the last approval, and it is listed as a potential benefit in the land use bylaw that an applicant can choose. And so staff do support this should the application be approved by the DRC. So in conclusion, there are several variances that staff advise are not reasonably consistent with the objectives and guidelines of the design manual. And so staff recommend that the substantive site plan approval application be refused on those matters. Thank you. That's it for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dean. I'll now go through the speakers list for members to ask questions of clarification to the staff. We'll start with Nathan. Any questions for you?
No, none at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Doug, any questions?
I have one, just regarding the middle passage, the thoroughfare, that just clarification on that. You're suggesting that it be refused because you want to channel pedestrian traffic on the street? Is that?
No, the refusal is on the variances. And so to have that public thoroughfare, they are requiring the street wall width be varied. because the design manual and the land use bylaw don't allow for gaps in the street wall width, and so they need that gap for that thoroughfare. But one of the conditions of the design manual says you're allowed to ask for that if it's for a clear purpose, and staff just aren't sure that the clear purpose is there based on the location of that thoroughfare. If it was meant to be a true shortcutting for pedestrians, it would be located closer to mid-block, but it's located so close to the street intersection, we feel like it doesn't hit its true purpose fully.
Okay, was there mention of it as a public space at all?
It'll be a private space. It'll be on private property, but people will be invited to cut through.
Right.
Any other questions, Doug?
No, that was the big one, but it was a big one. Thank you.
Jonathan, you're up next. Any questions for you?
Yeah, it's the same variance question there on the opening of the street wall there. There's mention of like the public benefit to it, and obviously I can see how having an accessible ramp might be beneficial in a very steep part of our city. Is there any like listed description or thoughts towards what planning would want to see as a public benefit that's been expressed to the developer? I read the previous version of this, and that was the direction was accessibility and staircase and ramp. And I'll have comments to that after the next presentation. But was there any other direction in terms of like what would the city want to see in terms of engaging public space that's not just seating for the restaurants that are proposed, I think, and some stairs and a ramp?
We didn't get into detailed discussions about how to make that space more inviting. I mean, having storefronts open up into it would be one option. I don't think that's actually possible based on the parking garage locations. So there's some significant changes in the design that would be required. And I think the applicant is also, designing based on the previous approval too. So that comes into play as well. But there was a condition of the previous approval that those ramps be code compliant or Hansen certified, whichever of the would be the most stringent. That's still being determined as they're working through the detailed design. So it's something also to keep in mind as well is that they're actively working on their building permit as well. So they're working through those detailed designs. So some of the answers we don't have, but they're figuring that out about the accessibility of that space.
And I guess the only other question I would have, I think it's variance 4 about the street wall setback. And you had mentioned the balconies don't basically have any setback from the street and I think in the large document we received, there was highlights in there about I think somewhere in the document that like balconies are not supposed to be more than 50% of the facade or something like that. I don't quite see any wording to that in here in that variance pushback from the city. Is that something that was kind of like, okay, well, the design approach to the balconies is different and interesting? Or is that something we should keep in mind that like the balconies do not meet the requirements at all? They wrap around the entire building almost.
Sure, I can provide clarification on that. So the 50% regulation you mentioned, so they're permitted to encroach into a step back if they are under 50% in width, but if they're greater than 50% of the width of the face of the building, then they're considered the building wall essentially. So that's why when you factor in the balconies, then the building wall there is no step back. And so that's how we got to that opinion.
That's all the questions for me. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Maria, any questions from you?
No, thank you, not at this time.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation, Jean. I'll now ask, where are we? Sorry. I will invite the applicant to provide their presentation on this item. Joining us today are Ian Watson and Jacob Ritchie from Upland Studio. Ian and Jacob, you will have 10 minutes for your presentation, followed by a question and answer session with members. Our legislative assistant will keep track of the time and note in the chat when you have 30 seconds left. Please let the legislative assistant know when you would like to advance to the next slide by saying next slide. And with all of that housekeeping, the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, everyone. And thank you also, Dean, for your presentation. It was really thorough and great. I'm Ian Watson, Senior Planner with Upland Planning and Design, and Ashley Jacobs here from United Golf. So we're back here to present to you Sky Halifax. Next slide. Located at the corners of Granville, Sackville, and Hollis. Next slide. And as Dean pointed out, the site's currently vacant. It's a surface parking lot, and really it's at the heart of what's been a substantial redevelopment of downtown. So there's the Maple, which was a new development. Next slide. There's the Discovery Center building under construction. Next slide. And there's the oh geez, that's escaping my Roy building. Thank you. Or the Roy building. Also, right one block over. So lots of development has happened in the area. Next slide. And, this is kind of the last big piece, and we're really excited to be here to keep it moving forward. So the site is currently a vacant parking lot, as well as an old office building, which, as Dean mentioned, is currently coming down. Next slide. So this is a pretty exciting opportunity. The site's been the long focus of various proposals to redevelop the two surface parking lots, activate a total of 229 meters of street frontage right in the heart of downtown, provide public space in an area lacking space, and put people living, people working in an area that has excellent walkability, bike infrastructure, and transit access. Next slide. And it's also an opportunity, as Dean mentioned, with the density bonusing provisions to remove some of the last above ground power poles in the capital district of downtown. Next slide. As Dean mentioned, this was approved, or a version of this was approved by the DRC in 2019 in November. Since that time, since the appeal period, we've been conducting detailed design, so getting construction drawings done, and as part of that process, determined that and as this often happens, this was has been one of the challenges, I think, with the downtown site plan approval process, is you do the kind of concept design for the site plan approval and then get into detailed design and determine there's challenges and need to make amendments. So that's been ongoing. As Dean mentioned, there's permits to demolish the office building and to begin excavation to ensure, we're racing the clock a little bit in terms of that repeal of the downtown Halifax plan. So those permits, along with excavation, help ensure that we meet that timeline. And then also, actually, I don't have on this list, one of the other things was we needed to discharge an old development agreement that related to the Metro Park buildings that was on one of the PIDs that made up this lot. So that took some time. And now I'm excited to say we are now in the phase of demolition. Next slide. And the building's coming down. My office is just down the street, and I've had the pleasure of walking by this every day and watching the facade be cut off, and then the little excavator working from the top down. And it's a challenging site with the bike lane and everything, but it's happening. This will be coming down shortly, and excavation should begin early in the new year, which is really exciting. Next slide. So, as Dean mentioned, as part of the detailed design process, there were challenges. Some changes needed to be made to accommodate structural and building mechanical in particular, fitting the mechanical systems for commercial, residential, and hotel proved to be a challenge once the engineers got involved. Needed more space, so the building had to go through some changes, and since we were coming for a whole new application anyways, as required by the downtown plan, this was an opportunity to revisit some of the aesthetics of the building, and particularly the towers. So there's about 350 units, and a good number of them are large units that would accommodate, families or people needing more space. There's 69 hotel units, retail, and then adequate parking and bike spaces to accommodate all of that. Next slide. And some of the, in looking at how this building came to be, I think there's some key design challenges that have needed to be worked around. This is most of a city block with 229 meters of street frontage, and those three frontages are at different elevations. There's a whole almost more than 7.5 meters of elevation difference between Granville and Hollis, and a very short bit of Sackville in between, which has a steep slope. So that's all been, had a huge effect on the way the podium turned out. Another big thing is that, because of the slope, really the only access is Hollis, but there's also a bike lane, intersections. So the area where vehicles could access the parking garage is very constrained. And then, of course, as Dean mentioned, the south end of the site is located under review plane. So all of these help shape the ultimate outcome of the building. Next slide. So this is from the Hollis facade podium. Next slide. This is the through block cut through and public space. Well, I guess it's private space, as Dean mentioned, but plaza space, I'll call it, as well as the outdoor patio for restaurants. Next slide. So as much as this has to be a whole new application under the rules of how site plan works, I very much thought of this as kind of an amendment to an existing application, taking an existing approval and improving on it. So I wanted to contrast, what we have approved and have preliminary permits for to build versus what we're hoping to achieve with this application. So the biggest change, I think, in all of this is the change to the towers, accommodating more mechanical space and using that to define much stronger a top to these buildings than the previous approved design. And then also adding that black band around the south tower to tie the whole design together, and doing away with the offset balconies and narrowing the tower up a little bit to provide a larger gap, to have less of an impact and I think really improve the aesthetics of the towers. Next slide. Another major change functionally and aesthetically is that the 2019 design, there was concerns about the hotel units being too deep, so the podium on Granville Street was set back, and then to meet the minimum street wall height requirements, we had to put a false screen up that met that technically, but didn't necessarily provide a good defined street wall. Through reworking the floor plates in that area in the podium, the architects were able to, I think, take a much more strong approach to the street wall on Granville and really redefine that space and provide a better experience walking along Granville. Another minor change there is that the concrete wall that addressed the slope was shortened and made more transparent, and in doing so, we could do away with the landscaping that the last time around at the DRC, there was concerns about it encroaching onto the public right of way. Next slide. And then I think one of the biggest changes as well is the center block plaza and pedestrian space. In the original proposal in 2019, we were very much thinking of it as a public space in the sense that it would be the stairs of the city. I think at the time the architect showed inspiration images from around the world of stairs where people could sit and take in the city and eat and all those kinds of things. And it really was seen as a public space and not so much an access. The DRC at the time had concerns about accessibility of it, and that people would be using it as a way to get through, to shorten the block length and to provide different options to get down the hill, and so requested that it be a barrier-free space. And so a substantial amount of work was put into redesigning that space to make it barrier free, make it meet building code in terms of railings, that kind of thing, and also still have it function as a place where people could sit and take in the city, or where those open plaza spaces could be programmed to bring some liveliness to the area. And as Dean pointed out, the staff do have concerns about not having doorway entrances onto it, for example, and as he rightly pointed out, the floor plates just don't work for that. Next slide. So really, I think what we're trying to get at here with the variance requests is for the podium side, joining 3 frontages at different elevations and match the context of the existing building, and provide that through block public space in an area that has very little public space. And then with the towers, really providing visual and operational distinction between the two, rather than having them all tied together with one big middle piece. Having effective floor plates that provide usable space inside, and then having that through block public space again, and responding to that across the whole building. And I know that's my time, so I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, so now I'll go through the speakers list for members to ask questions for any clarification. I'm going to change up the order a little bit, everyone. So just from the past 2 calls. So we'll start with Doug. Any questions for you?
Yes, one for Ian. Thank you. It's thanks for the presentation as well. Quick thing about the plaza, the center block. It was suggested that you can't put doors in there because of the geography and that. Do you have other suggestions how that space could be activated, that landscaping or anything that you're thinking secondary rather than dismissing it altogether?
Yeah, I think through you, Madam Chair, I think the doors themselves just don't work with interior floor plates. A lot going on inside that podium, but I think there's a lot of opportunities there through things like planter benches or seasonal programming. You could imagine that space being a Christmas trees with lights and that kind of thing. There's a lot of opportunities both at the top of the plaza and at the bottom. And maybe Jacob, who would ultimately be responsible for doing that kind of thing, might add on there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I would just say, that wrapping around the corner from the active commercial spaces that we have on Granville and Hollis is going to be the intent. And like we do on the ends of these blocks downtown, we're always trying to wrap commercial uses as far up that steep grade as possible and as far down that steep grade as possible, providing transparency. And really, once we have tenants there, we'll be able to work with them. And because it's a private space, as Dean said, we have a little more freedom in what we can do in those spaces. And we've seen that in some of our privately controlled public spaces like the waterfront, or you can do something a little more interesting than you can in the public roadway because you're not dealing with right-of-way. And the engineering team who have to care about all the users of the right-of-way, we can really do something that's targeted towards the needs of downtown residents and downtown visitors in this space.
Did everybody catch that? Jacob, your sound is a little muffled. I just want to make sure everyone.
Oh, thanks, Melly. I'll try to enunciate and look directly at the
Jack, any further questions?
No, not at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Next we'll go to Jonathan. Any questions for you?
Yes, for the pass-through as well. Looking at the floor plans, just to make sure my understanding, it's the parking levels that cause the height variance required. So you need that kind of like that angle inside of it due to the parking level passageways. Is that right?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. For the location of for the center block plaza space, I think as a cut through, I think staff are very correct in that, sure, it would be great if it was further south in terms of a cut through, though this does cut 40 meters off the block. But the big challenge there really is that slope of the parking garage to get down to the lower levels. Just physically inside, there's a limit to get the vehicle clearances that, without some really, really expensive workarounds, it's just not possible to have that further south.
Okay, and I guess my second question before we move towards the discussion thing, the differences between 2019 and 2023, there's quite a few of them. The South Tower seems to have gotten more of a rejig than the North Tower. Is there any like reason for that? Like in terms of the balconies that we previously talked about, the mechanical hat that's sitting on the top, like the two look quite different. Is there a reason why the North Tower didn't get kind of a similar treatment as the South Tower did?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. The North Tower is a fair bit more constrained in terms of how much, when you take a usable floor plate and then how much room you have to push and pull, there's very little there in terms of how much that tower could have moved or changed from the 2019 proposal. There was changes to the rooftop mechanical. It's a more distinct top, certainly not to the same level that was on the south. But yeah, the South Tower has changed quite a bit more, partly in response to that mechanical, the opportunities presented by that rooftop mechanical and the ability to tie that all in architecturally. But the bigger thing there was that there was a lot more room to push and pull, just when it all added up, that there was more ability there, more flexibility.
Thank you. That's it for my questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Next is Nathan. Any questions for you?
Yes, and thank you for the presentation. My question is regarding variance number 4, but I think it probably leads back to number 3, which other people have commented on. Just on the North Tower, the comments from the HRM staff being quite close to the abutting streets. So it just seems like that building's part of it seems to be quite compressed and pushed to the edge of the boundaries. But I suspect it's probably because of the needing of getting the ramps to sort of zigzag through to create the barrier-free requirements. I guess my question is more along the lines of, is there any way to sort of solve both problems with one solution, or is that something that's just not going to work in your mind?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I'm not the architect, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think the architectural goal in some sense of this was to have two distinct buildings tied together, with a common podium band at the middle. And so that you see that carried through the location of the central block plaza space lines up with the separation between the towers, and so yeah, to some degree, I think that location of the North Tower is very driven by the location of the plaza space. I think to my previous point, I think moving that is a significant challenge with the interior circulation space, particularly related to the parking ramp, and would be a substantial redesign of the building, even if it was possible.
I wouldn't mind adding something.
Go ahead, Jacob.
A lot of the premise of this building is that idea of getting two distinct towers and providing that separation. The as of right building that happens on a block this large is caked, right? Layered up, very thick, very wide. And we're trying to penetrate that and then find that volume out. And so the variances, both 4 and 6, sorry, 5 and 6 are all about that, getting the two towers as you say. One is very narrow, is coming up. It has a different top than the South Tower, but we did increase the distance between them here. Building on what we said last time, but it does trying to make two towers out of one large block, where the design manual and the standards for downtown Halifax want us to build one more massive base with two little towers popping out of the top. And this lets us really define a point tower on the north block, which we think is a real improvement in sight over there.
Okay. Nathan, any other questions for you?
No, thank you for your responses. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks. Maria, questions for you?
So I do like idea of pass through between these two buildings and having two towers that design wise I think it's gonna look really good. But I don't see that this the pass through that you're calling public space that will have a public benefit. I really don't see a much of the public benefit in the current design except stairs and the ramp. So maybe that would be something like to think about it, how you can evolve that space to really have some design public benefits. As you said, like it would be more used just as a stair ramp that we have very close by, like street line of the street. So, but basically nothing else for me.
No further questions?
No.
Okay. Okay, so having gone through all the questions, I'll now ask for the staff recommendation to be put on the floor for debate. Sorry, this will need a mover and a seconder. And the legislative assistant will post the motion in the chat so that it can be read aloud by the mover. And we do need you to read it all the way through.
I'll move it just to keep everything moving. So I just have to read from 1, refuse equalities from the qualitative from that part.
Yeah, so the motion that the design review committee, and then move into number 1 and number 2.
Yeah, so we motioned the design committee to debate this on the floor. Refuse the qualitative elements of the substantive site plan approval application for a 21-story mixed-use development at 1591 Granville Street and 1568 Hollis Street, Halifax, as shown in attachment A of the staff report dated November 21st, 2023, as the proposal does not comply with sections 2.4, 3.2.1, 3.3.1, and 3.3.4 of the design manual, as noted in the attachment D of the staff report dated November 21st, 2023, and number 2, refuse the requested variances to the land use bylaw requirements regarding street wall width, upper story street wall setback, and maximum tower width and separation as contained in attachment B of the staff report dated November 21st, 2023, as the proposal does not comply with section 3.6.4, 3.6.5, and 3.6.7 of the design manual, as noted in attachment D of the staff report dated November 21st, 2023. That's all I have. Yeah.
Thank you, Doug. So the mover can begin with their questions to staff if you have any further, Doug, and then we can proceed through the speakers list. So we'll start with you.
Yes, I do actually to HRM staff. From a point of view, you have there seems to me that there's an opportunity. There's a developer who is taking an initiative to create quasi-public space, whether it be a plaza or that, and they're taking that initiative, and it seems like an opportunity that shouldn't be dismissed when we're always trying to push for more outdoor space in whatever form. So why is it all or nothing? In your eyes, have you contemplated exploring a variation of this where we don't have to lose the space? Plazas are amazing. They do it everywhere. There's some very dim ones, but that's often addressed with public art and landscaping. And it seems wide enough and big enough to make something of it rather than lose it completely. So I'm not sure why it's all or nothing. That's my comment.
Just before we go there, I see Annie has her hand up, and I just want to make sure we're following the rules. So,
thank you, Chair. I'm just looking to make sure that we had a seconder on the motion.
Oh, sorry. Did I skip over a section?
Apologies, I seconded. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think
thank
we're
you
good.
for the
Yes,
question.
go ahead, Dean.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I guess part of what complicates this application is where it's at in the development process. So we have a clock on the wall and time's running out for this downtown Halifax plan. So the room for negotiations are limited. To ensure that the applicant, this was in front of the DRC for consideration. We had a certain amount of deadline to get that done to get it for a decision. Negotiations normally would happen through the process, exactly what you're speaking about. And it's also okay if the DRC disagrees with staff on what the clear purpose is. That's perfectly fine. That's your prerogative. And that's what happened the last time at the last application. So we could be at a difference in opinions on the clear purpose. But back to the point about negotiations and all or nothing, it's basically because of the timelines associated with trying to get this through. To make sure that it could be considered by DRC before the whole plan was just taken away. So the applicant had the opportunity to present their revisions to DRC. It really didn't allow us for a lot of time to negotiate on just that fact. Plus, also they have an approved site plan approval in place with permits in place. And they are moving forward on that design, and they would like to have some changes made. So negotiations on their end too were probably limited as well, because they do have approvals in place to go under that 2019 design and build that building. So if this was back in 2019, right, then even more so negotiations could have been more beneficial. But that's probably the biggest reason why it's all or none at this point in time.
Okay, it seems a shame. It seems like they're quite keen to have some type of space there. So I don't know if they would hold. Anyways, it sounds like it's beyond this group to have any impact. So I'm done.
Well, just to clarify, and there definitely have some. You as a committee have some ability to make some suggestions to improve that space. Absolutely, that can be done, and that can be conditions, right? So I just want to clarify that as well.
Okay. Well, the comment is it seems like it seems like it could be a very valuable space for the city for the next 100 years that it's going to be there, and in whatever iteration and moderation. And it sounds like there's a motivated developer, and it's just a matter of a short time tweak to get landscaping is. If you don't want it to go fully through, there seems to be a lot of options, and I understand the time thing. But I understand also that it seems like there's quite a few people motivated to, on one side anyways, to do what they have to. So I don't know if I don't know the technicalities of it, but you're saying they're under a gun, and it's a shame for something that's going to have an impact for the next 100 years. I don't know what the solution is.
So why don't we run through any questions that the group has for staff, and then once we've done that, we can talk about what the options are for us moving forward.
Yeah.
So next, Jonathan, did you have any questions for staff?
Just to make sure that I'm right now, would it just be questions? Is there going to be a moment to debate or kind of say our opinions on certain pieces of the variances? Is that later, or is
this is now, essentially? Yeah. If you have thoughts, opinions, and questions,
all right.
Now's the time.
All right. I think I'll start with the top and then go down from there. So kind of reflecting back on my comments and what was brought up by the city. The top for South Tower versus North Tower, the North Tower is a lot less successful in terms of how it's approaching the top. I'm sure it kind of looks like it needs a bit more mass to work, but it's because right now it looks like a little tiny hat at the top versus the other one is like a nice developed top. So in comparison to the two, they look quite, oh, well, that one's, so I would agree that the top on North should probably get some revisions. Either it's via just bulking it up or screening or something to help give it a little bit more visual mass. The variance one, I'm just going to go through the variances because I can't keep track of them. So I'm scrolling on the other screen just through the presentation. Why my eyes are darting over. So variance one seems straightforward. That's fine. The variance two, street walls, is quite straightforward. Variance three, the street wall width, I have like several conflicting thoughts, and also it seems there is conflicting thoughts with the previous iteration of it. So I like that the mass of the towers is informing the pass-through. And so moving that pass-through somewhere else on the site, or I think in the previous iteration, it was recommended maybe next to the parking garage as an extension of Blower Street. There's no real good spot. It doesn't actually align with Blower Street. It doesn't align with anything here, but it does align with what's on the site and what's being proposed. So I do like that quite a bit. In terms of the previous iteration, they asked for barrier-free ramp and barrier-free stairs. The current renderings show a stramp, which is a mix of stairs and ramps, and I see there's handrails next to the stairs, but there's no, well, the building code, that's the architect side, the building code requires a barrier-free ramp to have handrails on both sides. So stramps were pretty much become illegal out of the code about 20 years ago because you don't have handrails on both sides. So we'd have a barrier-free stair, but not a barrier-free ramp. And then it kind of begs the question of, well, you're forcing a giant barrier-free ramp, which forces everything around it to do nothing. What's the middle ground? Is there a win here? And is it a discussion on like, well, I think there's a really nice massing where the building sets back to create a nice, perhaps flat plaza at the top, and then a smaller setback massing at the bottom with a stair connecting the two. There could be something there where it would define the space a bit more depending on what street they're on, kind of give it an energy at the street they're on and not try to be both worlds. That's the thought, but I find the middle ground of, well, it's a weird mix of things, and the idea that people would sit there and look out at the adjacent building across the street, like there's no view. The building is built across the street. You're not looking at the harbor, you're looking at someone's apartment. So there's a bit of like, maybe the placemaking is better made on the site that it's at, you know, try to make that a bit more of a thing. So a bit of thoughts there. I think I like the idea of the through space. I don't know if it needs to connect the two streets, but I do like that it does break up the block a little bit. I like that it's informed by the towers. Variance 4, conflicting for me as well, where I like that the two buildings kind of have a distinct quality to each other. I can see some of the concerns about the street wall basically being almost zero because the balconies take up the entire facade of the building. In my mind, there's a bit of a, well, it's also bound by two streets. So it's not as if we're creating a giant street wall of balconies that goes on forever. We're bound on the short end of a block, and that would be it. So in my mind, I think there's room for a setback. I don't think it needs to be the complete setback, but that's my opinion there. And variance 5 is very straightforward. Variance 6, the tower width and separation. I do think there is an importance on keeping separation between the towers for daylighting, for privacy, for just having the space between the two. There's a reason why it's in there. So I would hesitate to say, yes, you know, tighten them up. It's a bit of an awkward scenario when you're too close to your neighbors. And I think, sorry, I wrote lots of things down. Very interesting presentations. I'm excited to see this building going through because I know when I was very young, it was the Twisted Sisters, I think, that was proposed on this site. 2 twisting buildings, and then it became this weird zigzaggy building that everyone kind of went, well, what's that? And so I like that there's a new iteration that's quite contemporary and looks quite nice. I think that's pretty much the summation of I think there's good potential and the direction is good. There's maybe just little tweaks that would help it really go where we need it to go. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Were there any follow-up questions for Dean, or just?
No, I think they were both pretty succinct in their directions, so no questions.
Okay, great, thank you. Nathan, any comments, thoughts, questions for you?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm coming back to my sort of original question, and it just sort of seems like the throughway is dictating the size and the setback issues that you're having on the north tower. I do really like the option of a throughway, and I really suspect that, you know, getting the ramps to work within the throughway are potentially at the root of the challenges that they're facing. I don't think there's going to be one solution that sort of makes everything work here. You know, and the alternative is if you try to go around the building, you know, trying to be barrier free, if you have somebody who's in a wheelchair, they're going to face real challenges being on the street. I do believe that the way that they have this set up is much safer for the public, and I believe people will use it. But it comes at a cost of the space that it requires to accomplish this. And I don't know if they've considered anything that maybe there's an actual, like a mechanical lift that could be, if we're, you know, really, you know, maybe there's a compromise that the throughway area isn't as large, but if we maybe utilize like a mechanical lift or something like that, where the public can utilize that in an effort to access and navigate these areas in a safe way, that maybe we don't need as much of an opening in the throughway, and that we can maybe adjust the size of the tower, which maybe gives them more real estate space and everything sort of combined. Just my general thoughts about it. In fact, you know, doesn't really, it puts us in a bit of a tough spot to be able to try to move this thing along. But if it's all or nothing, we can't have any conditions associated with it, I guess. I don't know if anyone has any other comments around that, but that's just my 2 cents.
There we go. Unmute myself. I would look to the city staff to maybe guide us here a little bit. My understanding is we can agree with the recommendations of the staff. We can agree with some of the recommendations of the staff, and if we disagree with others, then we either have to identify the section of the design manual that we feel is being met, or I think that's what we have to do. We have to define it based on the design manual, or we can accept the recommendations but make additional recommendations to the no, sorry, I'm getting confused. If we, never mind. Basically, it's those two. I think we can make recommendations, but in this case, if we don't accept all of the, or if we don't change all of, accept everything and the variances, then the design can't proceed. Correct?
Yes. So, yes, correct. So there's three things that the DRC can do. They can approve. They can approve with conditions, or deny the application. So approve with conditions means you approve it, and similar to the 2019 approval, that's what was given in 2019. It was approved, and then there's a list of conditions that the applicant must provide at detailed design, and then the development officer ensures that those are all met through the permitting process. So some of the examples are the barrier-free ramp was one of them, of the conditions of the previous approval, as an example. So that's what you have available to you today.
And am I correct, Dean, if we choose to accept the variances in contradiction to the recommendations that you are giving us today, then we have to find we have to determine amongst the committee which clause in the design manual that we feel that they are meeting to overturn that variance. Does that make sense?
I'll ask Andy to jump in to clarify process, but I think that you would you don't need to list the specific sections that they're meeting. In your opinion, you just have to.
I thought in past applications, I think we have to find some reason to not to agree with the variance, but I could be misremembering.
Well, I can quickly bring up the minutes to the 2019 meeting, because that would be the same circumstance this would be in. But I think it would be, in normal circumstances, defeat the motion on the floor now, which is staff's recommendation, and then place a new motion to approve and then the list of conditions. Now, whether or not specific sections have to be referenced,
Okay.
I think I'll have to. I can't answer that at this exact moment.
Nathan, I see you have your hand up, and then we'll
Yeah.
go to Maria next for her comments, questions. But
Yeah. Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to speak again on this, but I guess to follow on what we've been discussing is, I think the previous approval with conditions is perhaps why we're in this situation again. Like, they addressed the issues, and in the process of addressing the issues that were, determined to be important at the time, they've
created others.
they've created new ones that that the city is maybe not willing sort of to live with, or recommending that we don't accept. So again, even if we approve with conditions, it's like, where is this going to end, and whether or not we have time for this is, I guess, the question.
Well, I can clarify the conditions would be enforced by the development officer. So the next stage, that's assuming it's approval with conditions. It goes to the development officer, and through the detailed design, that's where the conditions are figured out. Now, you're correct. There's a little bit of a snowball effect, or butterfly effect, whatever the expression is there. If one change might lead to another, that it depends on the nature of the condition. So we can talk about that when they're placed, or what conditions you're thinking about, because some of them would have a substantial change on the design of the building, which then would require not approval with conditions. It would be more like a supplementary report required. So we have to come back with the changes in the design to show that it further meets the LUB, and if it doesn't, is there a variance option? And if there is, same process here again. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, it depends on your condition, on whether or not, if it goes to the DO, or if we have to come back through the process again. So I bet probably better to discuss what you're thinking about conditions, and then we can advise what the path forward for that would be.
Thank you. Maria, I want to make sure I've given you a chance. Did you have comments, thoughts, questions?
So basically, I'm okay for variance 1 and variance 2, but planning department is proposing. Regarding the requested variance 3, I completely agree with Jonathan and Nathan. So I see this as a very interesting area that will allow some future urban development, but there is a little more thinking about the design there. And as Nathan said, maybe it's not, we do need accessibility, but do we need accessibility from one street to another? Or we have 2 or 3 different plateaus inside that area, and that is accessible, lower one is accessible from the lower street, and upper one from the upper street. So that would be my comment for the variance 3. Regarding variance 4, I agree with what staff recommends, and as well, variance 5, that distance, just a second, variance 5, I'm okay with that one, but variance 6, distance between 2 towers, I do also have a problem with thinking that there will be not enough sunlight inside those apartments above if we squeeze those buildings to be to 15 meters, I think, instead of 23. So I agree with staff recommendation. That's all for me.
Okay, thank you. So the way the motion is currently on the floor is that it's for all of the variances together and the entire report as stated. would it, oh, Doug, did you have a comment, question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So from what I'm hearing, everyone on this committee seems to be in favor of some type of passage or quasi-public place. At the same time, I don't want to slow down the permitting process and I want to allow it to continue. I'm not sure how you address that. You're hearing that everyone, has a general consensus that there should be some type of quasi-public or private space, but some type of, whether it goes through or not, but we don't want to slow down the process and that. So I don't know where you go with that. I'm not sure.
Well, and what I'm wondering, and I'm looking to Annie and the team to help us figure this out. If we can break up the variances just so that we can confirm whether which ones we're all in agreement with, either approving or supporting.
I think it's all, or if you refuse
it's an all or
one
nothing
variance, then that's my understanding is because then they would have to go to a redesign of the building because they, for example, say the street wall width, just as an example. If you refuse that variance, then they aren't allowed to have that big gap in the middle of the street wall, so they're going to have to go to a redesign, which is a complete.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not to the point where I'm trying to get us to approve or not approve, but just to confirm a consensus, I guess, of where we have concerns or further questions about some of the variances. Like Maria, I heard you say variance 1 and 2 you were okay with. Variance 5 and 6, I want to say you were in agreement.
I'm in agreement with the staff on variance 1 and 2.
Yeah.
That they should be approved. I'm not in the agreement with variance 3 to refuse that variance. I think that is like very good possibility that we can have that plaza, but design needs to advance on that in that area. Variance 4, just a second. I am okay with staff recommendation as well for variance 4, variance 5 as well, and variance 6. So basically, the only variance that like I'm not in the agreement is variance 3.
Okay.
Staff recommendation.
And it's the same.
And Doug, you're the same?
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't want to slow down the process, so I'm not sure what you do.
Well, so I guess let's just confirm consensus on that note. So is everyone in agreement with the recommendations from, oh, sorry, Jonathan, you've got a hand up.
Sorry, I have my hand up just because I might be a little bit confused. And I think we're in the process of clarifying it. We have several variances here that the city has said yes and no to. But then the city is saying no, you say no to everything. Even though the city internally is saying yep, and no. But we have to say yes or no. It's either we accept everything or refuse everything. That's where we're at on the process right now.
Yeah, I was trying to understand where everybody sits.
Okay.
Yeah, on each of the variances, because some of the recommendations are refusals. If the committee is in agreement with some of those refusals of the variances, then it's a refusal for forever,
I guess it's perhaps what I don't fully understand, because I wasn't in the previous rounds of this and we haven't bumped into this yet in me being here, is that second middle weird option where we say no, we approve but with conditions. And is it the condition is variance 4 we don't like at all, redesign it? Or is the condition have to be like, well, put trees please, and that's like about the extent of it? I saw some head shaking, so I have
Dean, do you want to?
Sure, I can clarify. It would be the latter.
Okay.
It would be matters that can be addressed through permitting, like landscaping or a lighting feature or adding an architectural feature. But when you're talking about the massing, then that's when we have to just
And just so I understand as well, the refusal of this step there's for the developer option, there's two directions. Either they come back, they modify, and they go through this process again, or they get to build the 2019 version of this building. Is that how it kind of goes in the fork
They
here?
can also, there's an appeal option as well. So they can appeal DRC's decision
At
to
council.
regional council. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions about process?
No. I mean, from my understanding, they have to go back to the drawing board anyways. If you're refusing variance 3 for them, if you're
Yeah.
saying they can't have the passageway, they're going back to step 1 anyways. So is there no
Unless we disagree with the recommendation by by Dean or by the planning department. If we come along as a committee and say, we recommend approval of all of these variances, then the design as you see it would stay and the project would move forward as designed. But if we agree with the recommendations and those recommendations include a refusal, then it goes back to, it can go to appeal, or they can go back to the 2019.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you have your hand up.
Okay. I guess, are we allowed in this moment just to discuss a bit like amongst us, because we're discussing the variances, and I have a couple thoughts maybe that I'd like to share with the group as we discuss this. Is that, can I
We
bring them up?
can, our approval process is really focused on the qualitative elements as outlined in the variances. So
Yeah, because I guess it's just the thought of maybe without breaking them out is from the city side is looking at, and I understand there's a refusal option, is looking overall in the listed variances. Are there some big ones there that it's like, if those get approved through, the building kind of becomes, less than desirable in terms of outcomes. So, we all like the passage, we like the street height, wall height being more aligned with the neighbors. But the fact that they've also they want to remove the street wall separations, that the balconies are basically built very close to the street, is that a bigger negative? The fact that the units are going to be closer together now, and the privacy and the daylighting might be worse off on the street and in the units, is that enough negative to say, well, no, let's approve those so that we get a passage through the two and a little bit more alignment? For me, the overall feeling and use of the building is going to be higher priority, and how people interact around it. As much as I love the passage, if it's going to be at the negative effect of lighting and use of the building, then it's like, well, so at least that's some thoughts I'm having right now if we're going to go into the approach of acceptance or refusal.
anybody have any thoughts there?
No, it's still seeming like it's all or nothing, and it's not like we could do much other than, I mean, I love you to tell me differently, but it's not looking like you can. Like you want, if they're going back to, if we agree with all the recommendations, the developer has to go back and redo that plaza anyways, because they're being refused it. So they're going to go back and modify it. Why couldn't we get some public space there? Can we just say they're going to modify it anyways? Can we get a public space? That's what we're all asking for in some variation.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, it sounds like if it's refused, it would have to die completely. The public pass-through wouldn't exist at all, because the variance is asking for that thing to exist, right? Right now, the requirement would be that it's a full wall all the way to the street corner, and they're asking for a pass-through to help break up the mass. And something about an exit or an entrance in there somewhere, I didn't really spot it on the plans, but I assume it's partially to do with the restaurant seating and whatnot. But it sounds like if it's on the refusal side, it's the whole pass-through dies, unless if they build the 2019 version of the building.
Yeah, or if they can, so the concern with it was that the through block plaza was located too close to the street, and intersection to achieve its intended clear purpose. So if they can better articulate the purpose of the plaza in its current location,
That's
then
fine. Right.
Nathan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just one last final comment. I guess I do really like the throughway, and I think it has a lot of a lot of things that you can do with it. But as I reflect about a lot of the buildings in the city, that many of them don't have it, and we still survive. So it sort of comes to me as it's a really nice to have, but not a need to have. And I see this throughway as sort of causing a lot of the issues that HRM is having with the building, where one is much wider than the other, and then you got a skinny one next to it, and it might look off balanced and causing the setback issues with the street because they're trying to maximize the space. So I just sort of keep coming back to that. We just accept HRM's sort of recommendations and send them back to the drawing board to maybe come up and address those issues that they have. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
All right, well, I'll just go on the record saying it's a lost opportunity, and it seems I don't want to slow the process down for the developer as well, because I think the building itself would have huge impact, and I want to keep it going. They have to go back to the drawing board if we agree with all the variants, and we lose the plaza. I guess we lose it. Okay. I don't see another option. No one's kind of addressed any other.
Yeah.
To like for them to go back to the drawing board, but come up with some type of quasi-public space still, even if it's not a thoroughfare. That's not an option, is it? For us to say that, or is it? I'm still not clear.
Was that a question to staff?
Yeah, sorry.
I think so. Yes, please.
Sorry, Dean. Yeah,
that's okay. Could you repeat it just so I understand clearly? Like,
I want to know if we just agree with everything. Just to be clarity, we agree with all your recommendations, but the variance 3, which is some type of public, whether it's a thoroughfare or to still address that rather than just a street wall, can that happen as part of their redesign, which they're going back to anyways? Can we request that it becomes some type of outdoor space?
Yes, and that would, and you could request that, and then in any revised application moving forward, that would be reflected in the minutes that you requested this at the last application, and right. So that yes, if you put it in the minutes, it's in the minutes. That was the request, and maybe basis of the refusal if it's a refusal. I will state that I don't know if it redoes. They do the timelines associated with the downtown Halifax HCD, and when that is going to, once that becomes ready and approved by the minister, which I think the last time I spoke to our heritage staff is most likely by the second quarter of 2024, they're going to it's going to be approved potentially. So we're looking at 4 months for them to get another application through the process, which is that's not enough time.
Very tight. Yeah.
Yeah. So just for information to help guide you guys, it would be most likely either the appeal process or the 2019 permit, in reality, for revisions to the building design. It's hard to go through this process again because it's going to be taken away from us.
Yeah. I think I'd just like to add in my frame of thought is I'm on your side, Doug, of like I really like the idea of it, but it's also in the framework of like every developer needs to work within the bounds of the requirements of the area. And I have more concerns and fears about making the towers sit awkwardly on the site, too close to the streets, too close to each other for the addition of, like you were saying, I think it's Nathan, sorry, your name is blanking for me, where it's like the passageway, it has a really interesting component, but the negative effects around it is like everyone else has to work around those bounds of, your floor plates can't go so close. You can't encroach to each other so that you have a privacy and daylighting issue. So why would we allow the passage of that just because there's an added like stairway through the building? Is like where I'm trying to balance of, well, I tend to think of, well, those upper negatives are kind of outbalancing the positive of a passageway. And as the city said, the passageway is right next to the street. So what extra real bonus is it giving for everyone around it? Does it outweigh the tower problems? And I'm not sure it does.
Keep
Okay.
in mind, everyone, we do not have to be unanimous in our votes. So
That's very true as well.
we can have different opinions, and depending on how the vote goes, that will determine whether it's passed or defeated.
Sounds good. Thank you. My comments are all done.
Annie, did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. So just, before heading into a vote, if the committee would like, the committee can also have an opportunity to just do final clarifications with the applicant as well. Normally, we, end of once we get into the staff side of things, but given how the discussion has gone, if that's the will of the committee, I can bring them back over.
To the group, are there any further questions or clarifications that you require from the applicants?
Not at this time, not for me. No. It's more a city issue.
Not for me either.
Nathan, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, sorry, no further questions for me. Thank you.
Maria, how about you?
I have a question for you, Madam Chair. So, because this is my first design review committee,
Of course.
so we are voting. Could you just?
So
go
we have
through.
yeah, of course. We have a motion on the floor that was motioned and seconded to accept the recommendations of the city planning report, essentially, which would, and I'm just going to summarize it really quickly, and I've got 3 dozen different things open, but essentially they're recommending approval of the first variance, which is the street line setback. They're recommending approval of the street wall height, which is variance number 2. They are recommending refusal of the street wall width, variance number 3. They are recommending refusal of variance 4, which is the street wall setback. Recommending approval of the upper story side yard step back, variance 5, and recommending refusal of the tower width and separation, which is variance 6. So the motion that Doug had put on the floor and that Nathan had seconded is essentially a agreement of that analysis. So we would vote whether we agree with all of those variances as they've been recommended by the city planning department.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody have any further comments or questions, or should we try to put this to a vote? You good?
Sorry. It's just to make sure I'm completely clear. And this might be slightly to you, Dean. So as the read it there, the refused requested variances to land use bylaw requirements. So essentially those would just be out, those would only be refusing the ones that you've highlighted as refused. The other ones could go as accepted. Okay. That's good. Okay, sorry. I think I had a little bit of a mix up there where I thought it was if we refuse one, we refuse them all, versus some are in this idea, some would be accepted, some would be refused. It just depends what the city said, accept or refuse. Like variance 1, they said yes, and variance 3, I think they said no. This is just confirming that, that if we say, yeah, we agree with the city, variance 1 and whatever would get yes, and then variance, the other ones would get no, depending which ones are yes or no. Okay, that clears it up. That makes me a little bit more comfortable with, there's some good ones in there that I'm glad are going to stay.
We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
That's very good. Okay.
I think what it does, it's just because of the timing of this, one refusal of any of the variances results in a time crunch for the redesign. Is that correct statement, Dean?
So a refusal is a refusal of everything. So the application would be considered refused.
Okay, so the variances that even the city said, yes, we would agree, those would all be refused as
We're
well?
refusing those too?
Yeah, the application is being refused. So
Because of
right, yes. Yeah, so one bad apple, so to speak.
Yeah,
ruins- So
that's where it's
that's
like, I wish it was all of them we could go individually, because then it's like, yeah, I'd say yes to a bunch of them and no to some. But if it's an all and then I
Yeah.
can't say yes. That's my own opinion, but I can't say yes because there's some really negative ones in there, in my opinion, that don't balance out the positive ones. So yeah, that was my confusion there, is we're not really looking at them line by line. It's either they're all dead or they're all approved. And the city's recommending that it's all dead because there's some that the city doesn't agree with.
That's right.
Okay.
Correct.
Is
Thank
it
you for that
always,
clarification.
sorry, just quick question. Is it always like that? I don't remember it in the past. We're always, it's all or nothing to approve or disapprove. They don't have it broken out in the future. We can't request that, or is it?
We can, yes.
That's
And
it.
we have in the past, but it creates a lot of complications. And it doesn't really, if we agree with any of the refusals, it has the same net effect for this particular project because of the change in the
Sure.
heritage legislation coming through.
I was thinking more on future projects. This one sounds like we just have to move forward, but in the future. Okay.
Sorry, Maria, you had your hand up. I didn't mean to skip over you.
Sorry, thank you for that. So my understanding is that either way, they need to go back and redesign, because planning department is refusing a couple of variances. Is that correct? If we agree with any of these refusals with the planning department,
Exactly.
they need to go back.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Any other clarifications? Okay, I'll read the motion on the floor just one more time for everyone's sake. So the motion that we currently have on the floor is that the Design Review Committee refuse the qualitative elements of the substantive site plan approval application for a 21-story mixed-use development at 1591 Granville Street and 1568 Hollis Street, Halifax, as shown in attachment A of the staff report dated November 21st, 2023, as the proposal does not comply with sections 2.4, 3.2.1, 3.3.1, and 3.3.4 of the design manual, as noted in attachment D of the staff report dated November 21st, 2023, and that the Design Review Committee refused the requested variances to the land use bylaw requirements regarding street wall width, upper story street wall setback, and maximum tower width and separation, as contained in attachment B of the staff report dated November 21st, 2023, as the proposal does not comply with sections 3.6.4, 3.6.5, and 3.6.7 of the design manual, as noted in attachment D of the staff report dated November 21st, 2023. So, with those motions on the floor, if there are no further comments or questions to staff or the applicants, I'm going to call the question on the motion so that we can vote. If all of those in favor signify by saying aye, and any contrary minded, please say nay.
All right. I agree reluctantly.
As well, aye.
Yes, aye.
2, 3 ayes. Are there any contrary minded? Any nays?
I'm aye as well, but as I said, reluctantly because of some of the variants. But
Thank you. So based on the vote, the motion has been carried. We can note that. So thank you very much, Dean and Annie, for your clarifications throughout that process and answering our many questions. Next, we'll move on to the proposed 2024 meeting schedule. So we have, or the approval of that of the 2024 meeting schedule. Our legislative assistant is available for any questions that the members may have. Any questions from the committee on that, on the proposed schedule?
No.
Okay.
None for me. No.
No,
So we do have the motion in the chat that to be put to the, I will now ask for the motion to be put on the floor. This will need a mover and a seconder, and the legislative assistant has posted the motion in the chat to be read aloud by the mover. If we get a motion, please.
I can do the motion. So I propose a motion that the Design Review Committee approve the proposed 2024 Design Review Committee meeting schedule as outlined in the staff memorandum.
I
Thank
second.
you. So we've got moved by Jonathan and seconded by Nathan. Are there any, I'll run through the list if there's any questions. Jonathan, did you have any questions about the schedule?
No questions, thank you.
Nathan, how about you?
None for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Doug, questions?
No, thank you.
And Maria, any questions? Can you hear me, Maria?
Yes, can you hear me? No, I don't
There
have
we
any
go.
questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
So seeing as there are no questions on the proposed schedule, I'll call for the question on the motion and the vote to be held. So all those in favor of approving the meeting schedule as outlined in the staff memorandum signify by saying aye, and any contrary minded say nay, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Perfect. So that schedule is approved. Thank you very much, everyone. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. I can ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
Madam Chair, request motion to adjourn.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. So the meeting has been adjourned at 6:16 p.m. On the 18th of December. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation, to the applicants for the presentation.